So the question is a big one. Was this one song the thing that did it? The single track that took a regional sensation and turned him into a global phenomenon in the blink of an eye? The short answer is complicated. It's not a simple yes or no, but it's the closest thing to a yes you can probably get. It wasn't like flipping a switch, but it was like lighting the fuse on a rocket. Everything that came before was building the rocket. This song was the launch. To really get it, you have to go back to the very end of 1955. At that point, the man was already a star. But what kind of star? He was a Southern star, a phenomenon below the Mason-Dixon line. He was the kid on the Louisiana Hayride, a live radio show that was a big deal in his territory. He was the guy with the records on Sun Records, a small but powerful label out of Memphis, run by Sam Phillips. Sam knew what he had. He had lightning in a bottle. This kid was mixing sounds nobody was supposed to mix. He took country, and he took blues, which was black music back then, and he smashed them together with a kind of frantic, youthful energy. The records he made at Sun are legendary now. Songs like That's All Right and Mystery Train. They sound raw, they sound alive. You can almost feel the small room they were recorded in. And they were hits. Big hits on the country charts. Teenagers in the South were losing their minds over him. His live shows were already becoming notorious. He'd get up there, shake his leg, and the girls would scream. It was chaos. It was something new. Parents were scared. Preachers were condemning him. He was a rebellion happening in real time. But outside of the South, a lot of people had no idea who he was. He was a name you might see in a trade magazine if you were in the music business. A country artist with some regional heat. The big pop radio stations in New York or Los Angeles weren't playing him. He wasn't on national television. He was a big fish, but in a relatively small pond. The rest of America was listening to Perry Como, to Rosemary Clooney. It was a different world. It was a world of polite, orchestrated, safe pop music. Then came the deal. Sam Phillips at Sun Records was running a small operation. He knew he couldn't take his star to the next level. He didn't have the resources, the distribution, the muscle, so he sold his contract. He sold it to RCA Victor, one of the biggest record companies in the world. The price was an unbelievable $40,000. It was the most money ever paid for a single artist contract up to that point. It was a massive gamble for RCA. They were buying a country act and hoping they could sell him to the whole country, to the pop market. A lot of people in the industry thought they were crazy. They thought this kid was a fad, a hillbilly act that would burn out fast. They wondered if his raw, wild sound could even be captured properly in their big, sterile Nashville studios. This is the moment everything changes. The pressure was on. For RCA, they needed to prove their investment was smart. For him, he needed to deliver a hit, a real hit, a national #1 pop chart hit. His first recording session for the new label was set for January 1956 in Nashville. What was he going to record? He could have played it safe. He could have done a more polished version of the rockabilly stuff he was doing at Sun. He could have tried to sound like the other pop stars of the day. He did not. Instead, he chose a song that was strange. It was dark. It was moody. It was not a happy teenage dance tune. The idea for it came from a newspaper story, a true story about a man who had killed himself in a hotel. The man left a note, and in the note, he'd written one line, "I walk a lonely street." A songwriter named Mae Boren Axton heard this story and it stuck with her. She and a co-writer, Thomas Durden, built a whole story around that line. A story about a place at the end of that lonely street. A place for broken-hearted people. A gloomy, desolate place where the bellhop's tears flow and the desk clerk is dressed in black. It was more like a surreal poem than a pop song. It was slow, plodding, and full of despair. He heard a demo of the song and he knew it was the one. He saw the potential in it. He felt it. When he brought it to the studio in Nashville, the professional session musicians were baffled. These were the best in the business. Men like Chet Atkins on guitar and Floyd Kramer on piano. They were used to playing clean, predictable country and pop. This song was different. The structure was weird. The mood was bleak. They didn't get it. The story goes that one of the RCA executives, after hearing the first take, famously said, "That doesn't sound like him." They were worried. This was their big investment. This was the song he chose to lead with. A depressing blues dirge. But he knew what he wanted. He had his own band with him, Scotty Moore on guitar and Bill Black on bass, and DJ Fontana on drums. They were the ones who understood his sound. He directed the session. He told the pianist what to play. He asked for a specific kind of echo on his voice, a sound that would make him seem like he was singing in a giant empty hall. They worked on it, take after take. The final result was something nobody had ever heard before. It starts with that single lonely guitar note, Then the piano comes in, playing those bluesy, tumbling chords. And then his voice, it comes in low and full of ache. He doesn't sound like a teenager. He sounds like an old soul who has seen too much. The echo on his voice is immense. It's cavernous. It makes the song sound like it's being sung from the bottom of a well. The whole thing is sparse. There's so much empty space in the music. It lets the sadness breathe. The guitar solo from Scotty Moore isn't fast or flashy. It's sharp and painful, like broken glass. It's a sound of pure isolation. RCA released the single at the end of January 1956, and at first, nothing much happened. Radio programmers were confused, just like the musicians had been. What was this? It wasn't rock and roll in the style of Bill Haley's Rock Around the Clock. You couldn't really dance to it. It wasn't country, it wasn't pop, it was just strange. It started slow. It wasn't an immediate, out-of-the-gate smash hit. It needed a push. And that push came from a new and powerful force in American culture television. And his manager, Colonel Tom Parker, knew that the key to breaking him nationally was to get him seen. People didn't just need to hear him, they needed to experience him. His first national television appearance was on a show hosted by two big band leaders, the Dorsey brothers. It was called Stage Show. He came on for the first time on January 28th, 1956, the day after the single was released. He was a jolt of electricity to the black and white TV screen. He was nervous, but he was also magnetic. He sang his new song. And when he did, something happened. People at home saw this kid with the slicked back hair, the sleepy eyes, and the sneer on his lip. He held his guitar like a shield, and as he sang this dark, mournful song, his body twitched. His legs started shaking. He moved in a way nobody on television had ever moved before. It was suggestive. It was raw. It was dangerous. The camera operators didn't even know how to film him. They would try to do a close-up, and he'd move out of the frame. The teenagers who saw it were mesmerized. The adults were appalled. Who was this person? What was this music? He was on the Dorsey Brothers show 6 times over the next 2 months. Each time, he gained more fans, and each time, the single sold more copies. The song started to climb the charts. The television appearances were the fuel. This weird, slow, sad song was the anthem. It gave a sound to his entire persona. So he wasn't just a happy-go-lucky rock and roller, he was a rebel. He was an outsider. He understood loneliness. The song gave him depth. It proved he was more than just a kid who could shake his hips. He was a serious artist with a unique voice. By April, the song was a phenomenon. It was going up the pop charts, the country charts, and even the R&B charts. This was almost unheard of. It meant everyone was listening. White kids, black kids, country fans, city kids. The song crossed all the lines. It finally hit #1 on the Billboard Top 100 chart in late April, and it stayed there for 7 weeks. It became his first single to sell over 1 million copies. His subsequent TV appearances that year just threw more gasoline on the fire. He was on The Milton Berle Show, where his famously scandalous performance of another song caused a national uproar. He was on The Steve Allen Show, where they tried to tame him by making him wear a tuxedo and sing to a basset hound. And finally, he was on The Ed Sullivan Show, the biggest show in the country. And Ed Sullivan had initially said he would never have the guy on his show because he was too vulgar. But he couldn't ignore the ratings, he paid him a fortune, and for his first appearance, they famously only filmed him from the waist up, afraid of what his hips might do to the youth of America. By the time he was on Ed Sullivan, he was the biggest star in the world, and the song that had introduced him to most of that world was this strange, spooky blues number. So, let's go back to the original question. Did this one song make him a global superstar overnight? Overnight is the tricky word. It wasn't literally overnight. It was a process that took about 3 or 4 months from the release of the single in late January to its absolute dominance of the charts and the culture by May. But in the grand scheme of a career, 3 months is the blink of an eye. It was an incredibly rapid ascent from regional hero to national obsession. And was it global? It certainly made him a superstar in America, which was the cultural center of the world at the time. The record quickly spread to the UK and the rest of Europe. It was the first shockwave that was felt around the globe. The subsequent hits and the movies would solidify his global status, but this was the beginning. This was the record that announced his arrival on the world stage. Without this song, his career might have been very different. If he had come out with a more standard happy rock and roll song, he might have been seen as just another teen idol. But he came out with something deep, something artistic, something that felt real and raw and full of pain. It was a statement, it showed he had incredible instincts. He picked a song that nobody believed in, and he turned it into the foundation of his entire kingdom. It was the perfect vehicle for his voice, his look, his attitude. The song and the singer were inseparable. The television performances burned the image of him singing it into the collective consciousness. So, no, he wasn't a complete unknown one day and a global icon the next. He had built a strong foundation in the South. But this song was the moment of explosion. It was the transition point. It was the song that took him out of the smoky clubs of Memphis and put him into every living room in America. It was the sound that defined him to millions of people for the first time. It was dark, it was strange, it was sexy, it was lonely, and it was revolutionary. It was the key that unlocked the door to everything that followed. It was the sound of a cultural shift, a quiet, bluesy earthquake that changed music forever. It was a song called Heartbreak Hotel.